Hello, Gen Genies. Before we get started, Rich and I want to let you in on some exciting updates for our Patreon subscribers.
Patreon is a site where listeners can pledge a small monthly amount, either $5 or $10, to support the cost of bringing you your favorite podcast.
All patrons get early access to new CutOff Jeans episodes before they're released to the public.
And along with our undying gratitude, you'll also be able to join our special patron-only Facebook group.
But the most exciting new perk is exclusive access to essays I'm writing from my upcoming memoir. And you guys can help me be editors.
New Patreon supporters will also get a shout-out on the podcast.
Rich and I enjoy bringing you the CutOff Jeans podcast and would mean so much if you would consider supporting our labor of love.
Just go to patreon.com/CutOff Jeans podcast.
Thank you all so much, my Gen Genies.
And now, on with the show.
Is your family tree a mystery? Are you fascinated by genealogy? Well, hip, hip, hooray, let's talk DNA with Julie.
The truth is in your genes.
In CutOff Jeans.
Welcome to CutOff Jeans, the podcast that helps you find your truth using nothing but DNA. I'm Julie Dixon-Jackson, and I'm a genetic genealogist, henceforth known as a Gen Genie.
And I am Richard Castle, the producer and co-host of this podcast. How are you doing today, Julie?
I'm fine. Speaking of Gen Genie, I finally got my personalized license plate.
The one that says Gen Genie?
Yes.
I love it. That's so exciting. How fun.
It took like 10 months or something for it to finally come in.
Really?
The prisons must be backed up. I think that's where they make them, right?
I don't know. Do they still do that?
I don't know.
I would just think it's some kind of machine or computer, but who knows? That's exciting. I'm going to have to look for you on the road. You're going to wonder now, like if somebody's beeping at you, if you've done something wrong or whether they've just recognized you.
Right. Or they're a David Bowie fan.
Oh, because of, yes.
Gene Genie.
Gene Genie, right. I don't have a vanity plate. Although I've had some that almost look like they were, and they were just by random. Yeah.
Like you can, well, that's what my last license plate, which was not a vanity plate, but it almost was to me because the way it read to me was very significant.
Oh.
It was 7DBL269.
Okay. 7 double what?
7 is my lucky number.
Oh.
Double 2, 2 and 2. I have that whole sideshow thing.
For our listeners, Julie was in the musical Sideshow where she played a Siamese twin.
Correct. And 69 is self-explanatory.
Okay, my goodness.
Yeah, I used to have, my the one that I had when we met was to be a star.
Oh, to be a star.
Which looked like to basta, which basically basta in Italian means stop. So to stop.
I love that you had that you have plates that reflect your different loves in your life.
It was fun. I don't know. It feels a little juvenile, to tell you the truth.
Really? I don't know. I don't think it's juvenile. I think it's a celebration of all that you are, and I think that's wonderful. But then again, I think you're wonderful anyway, so you really can't do any wrong in my eyes, Julie.
Yay! And that's why you're a keeper. Hey, I want to thank the listeners who've been reaching out for help. I actually worked with 2 listeners in the last couple of weeks. I solved, Luann Clark. I figured out who her biological father was for her.
Oh, wow.
Because she was an NPE. And then another listener, I won't say her name because she didn't give me permission. Mm-hmm. But I worked on her case. It was a much more difficult Ashkenazi Jew and dogamy very low match thing. So I spent a little bit of time analyzing it and told her that there was no point in me going any further. They shouldn't spend any more money because it was something that is not readily solvable.
I see. Yeah.
So guys, keep reaching out to me though. It's really great. And I'm very reasonable. I am a tiny fraction of the price of other companies, and especially for listeners.
Yeah, and the other part of this is that you're so honest about the fact that save your money. Like I can't help you at this point, rather than just keep digging and digging. Like if you can help them, great, and you'll let them know if you can't as well. So.
Right? Yeah, I'm not going to take somebody's money when beyond the initial analysis if I don't think it's solvable or if it's...
Having a good Gen Genie is like having a good mechanic. Like you,
yes.
Because honestly, you don't trust your mechanic. You're like, wait a minute, I just came in here for an oil change. Why is this costing me $2,000?
How many alternators do I need?
Exactly. My car does not have endogamy. I don't understand that. Let's get on with the shoe.
Okay, it's a really big shoe.
Really big shoe.
All right, here we go. I'm going to put you on the seat. On the seat? I'm going to put you in the hot seat.
Oh, the hot seat. Okay, I'm like...
Not just the seat, the hot seat.
Oh, good. I get to sit down.
Please sit down for this. Okay, so last episode, we got into a discussion about my growing concern and advocacy I feel I need to have for fellow adoptees regarding adoption reform.
Yes.
And we had a long discussion about it. And Jamie Weiss, who is actually a future Storytime guest, I believe, very much an adoptee advocate, so not unexpected. But this is what she said. And then we'll get into it. She said, "Oh boy, I have so much to say about this episode. One of the most important is a reply to Rich regarding open adoption and his assertion that biological parents voluntarily signed away their parenting rights. Rich, while that is true for some cases and some it is not, regardless, the adopted person never consented to the agreement or signed away any of their rights to their parent and other family members. And just being allowed to contact your biological family at the age of 18 is not okay. The loss of all the prior years can never be regained. Can you imagine only starting to know your parents and siblings at age 18 or 30 or 50 or 70? And then she said, in regards to the safe relationships, which is the thing that you and I were talking about, the instances where it's unsafe are definitely the minority, but this is also typically only based on how safe the parent might be and doesn't leave the consideration of other biological relatives. That's one. I put safe in quotations because Julie stated this should not be determined by the adoptive parents because they have their own motivations for cutting contact. I believe we should start exploring adoption more in terms of legal guardianship than legal ownership. The idea of as born unto in adoption is really problematic and part of what has created this attitude of ownership amongst adoptive families and their sympathizers. This leads to a whole host of issues such as legal severance of familial ties, erasure of identity, denial of origins, etc. Well, I responded to her and I said, I will say that Rich leans into the voice of every man, which is kind of your job, and is always willing to take criticism. Also, I realized that I didn't bring up the subject of adoptee consent, which I didn't unless it was edited out. Need to go back and re-listen, blah, 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 blah. And then there was more, but let's just talk about this.
Oh, sure. I mean, actually, everything that you just read me from Jamie Weiss, I understand it and I agree with it. I mean, okay. I'm not saying that what I was saying at the time was wrong. I'm saying that I understand that perhaps while we were discussing this, we were not bringing in the adoptee into this situation. We were talking about the adoptive parents versus the birth parents, and that yes.
But the whole point of the conversation was adoption reform, which should be the adoptee centered.
And I agree with that.
Also, we were talking about, why would a biological parent who had given up their rights have any rights, especially if they were an addict or something we need to think about is that usually in a case where there is contact, the child does not go alone to hang out with the biological family. Sure. It's usually something that is supervised.
Right. Yes.
Yes. And, it's, and as we said before, it's a case by case thing, but because that's a possibility, then we shouldn't completely annihilate the idea of adoption reform. And, things like what you were saying are valid, but they are thrown in our face every day as adoptees when we are trying to express the need for reform. And that's usually the first thing. Whoa. Well, then what? So they should stick with drug addict families, or they were taken away for a reason. It's just that being said, while valid, is very triggering for adoptees who are trying to make a difference and who have experienced trauma.
And I get that, and I understand. And as I'm sure I mentioned, I'm not part of that group. I'm not adopted, and I have not adopted children or given up anybody for adoption. So I am not part of that group, and I can only speak from a third person understanding of this narrative. And I think my job here to be on the podcast is to hear what you have to say and give my opinion based on whatever knowledge I have or whatever I bring to the table. And I think that's valid. And I think that if it was just the two of us, always talking about from the same point of view, it wouldn't be that interesting. So I do try to sometimes play devil's advocate. I don't believe that's what I was doing, actually,
Yeah, no, I don't
last
either.
week. But I completely understand where she's coming from and where anybody who was listening who found that it was either insensitive or whatever it may have been. So if that was the case, please know that my intentions are only to be educated and to help Julie educate our listeners. And that's what I'm here to do. And that's why I'm here.
Right. Thank you.
But nothing that I say, I'm sure that there are people that would think the same thing. And so I am that voice of, like you said. Well,
there are lots of people who think the same thing.
Right.
And the conversation stops with that.
Right. And I only want to spur more conversation and not be, because I don't know if I'm right or wrong on these things. I'm only sort of reacting to what you're saying. And like I remember, when you mentioned last time we were talking about this adoption reform, about having somebody have like a therapist assigned to them for their life. And I was thinking, well, good luck with that. I didn't say that to you, but I was like, who's going to pay for that? Like what agency is going to pay for that?
Right.
But I understand the need for it, but I didn't say it because I understand where it's coming from.
Right. And therein lies the problem of agencies being for-profit industry.
Exactly. And,
this is one of the only countries where adoption is a for-profit business.
Yes. And,
that's a huge problem.
I'll also admit that after we recorded the podcast last time, I discussed this the adoption reform with somebody I'm very close to who is adopted, because it stayed with me, and we had talked about it, and I found it so fascinating and such an interesting subject to talk about, and I wanted to hear his opinion.
Yeah,
he was very adamant and agreed with you, Julie, about like the fact that he didn't think that it was right for people to change the name of a child who's adopted.
Interesting.
Yeah, and his name was changed.
Yeah, that was mine.
Yeah, and he said, and I agree with that. I when you said it, I wasn't sure. I was thinking, I don't know, but it was interesting to have that confirmed by another adoptee, and you weren't sure either. You said you weren't sure where you fell on that, but you were leaning toward, I don't think that it should be allowed that an adoptive parent would rename a child.
Yeah.
First names we're talking about, not last names, clearly.
Right. Well, right. Yeah. Well, for years, I didn't know until quite recently that I had a name and that it was on my original birth certificate.
Right.
I knew that she had called me something, and the adoption agency were calling me that, I guess. I don't know. And my parents knew what that was, but told me they didn't. Which is a whole other set of issues.
Sure.
But I think if somebody was intentionally given a name, I kind of feel like that's an identifier for them. I don't know.
Because even if you were too young to know, and most people when they're adopted are too young to know that they had another name, it's still, there's an identity attached to that, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. What's interesting is when I was going through my legal issues that I've referred to a few times, and the opposing party's lawyer spent the entire time villainizing me or vilifying me because of my adoption advocacy and because of my openness about finding my biological truth and my search, just my entire journey. I've written about it and it's public. And he used that as a way of making me look like the ungrateful adoptee, which works. But one of the things he accused me of is I had written in my blog about when I first saw my adoption records, and I saw what my mother's name. Oh, I saw what my name was. Yes, that's when I first saw what my name was in the adoption agency records. And in the blog, I wrote I tried out several versions of that name, meaning I sat there going Katrina Ellen Price, Katie Price, Cat Price, Cat Jackson, Cat Dixon, all of those things. And he took that as me changing my name professionally and using it as...
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. And he said, oh, you didn't use it? And I'm like, first of all, no, I didn't. Even if I had, why is that your business?
Right.
And second of all, if I had, that would be another way for him to say that I was erasing my parents.
Yeah.
So a name is an important thing.
It is. It is.
And we have every adoptee, no matter what you say, has identity issues.
Oh yeah,
and it's something that is just a very small piece of a very complicated web.
I agree, and obviously the whole discussion was interesting enough to me to even discuss it after we.
Yeah.
After we recorded. So, but, I think...
I'm glad you asked him about that.
Yeah. And, we talked about other things, but I found that the most fascinating, that he agreed with you on that. And also, I'll just add that I'm really happy that we have listeners who are engaging with us about this stuff. So I just want to thank Jamie for engaging and good for you. Call me out if I say something that's either wrong or inappropriate or let's have a discussion.
Yeah.
That's why we're here.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And on that note, I'd like to take a break.
Me too.
If you're enjoying our podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review, or consider supporting us on our Patreon page, patreon.com/CutOff Jeans Podcast. Now back to Julie and me.
All right, we're back. Let's talk about Jerry Jones' Love-Child.
Oh, that sounds like a great title. I don't know anything about it, but let's go.
Do you know who Jerry Jones is?
No, I know who Jenny Jones was. She had a talk show.
No, ma'am.
No, who's Jerry Jones?
Jerry Jones is the owner of the Dallas Cowboys. I was going to say Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders. I guess you could say he's with them too.
He owns the football team. Okay.
Yes, he owns the football team. Very prominent family. Alexandra Davis, who lives in Washington, D.C., filed a lawsuit against Jones, now 79, in Dallas County Court last Thursday. It says Jones courted her mother, Cynthia Davis Spencer, in 1995 when she was working at the American Airlines ticket counter in Little Rock, Arkansas. Spencer was estranged from her husband at the time. The lawsuit says Alexandra Davis, that's the plaintiff, has lived her life fatherless and in secret and in fear. If she should tell anyone who her father was, she and her mother would lose financial support or worse. The plaintiff has had to endure endless public profiles of her father and siblings while forced to remain secret to everyone, including her closest confidants. Jones and his wife, Jean, have 3 children, Stephen, Jerry Jr., and Charlotte. Jim Wilkinson, a spokesman for Jones, declined to comment. Davis' Dallas-based attorney, Andrew Bergman, also declined to comment. Davis has asked a court to be recognized as Jones's daughter and to be released from the confidentiality agreement that her mother agreed to when she was a baby.
But she didn't sign that agreement. The mother did.
Once again, there was no consent by her, which is why she's asking to. In fact, I don't think she shouldn't be involved in that agreement because she didn't sign anything.
No, I mean, your mother.
That's what you just said.
Your mother can't sign an agreement for you for the rest of your life.
Not for the rest of your life. It is hard to imagine what could be less in the best interest of a child than to enforce agreements that leave a child without a father and which prevent or legally punish a child from even stating who her father is. The lawsuit says. The lawsuit alleges that Jones abandoned and shunned Davis and forced her to live in secrecy after her birth in Little Rock on December 16, 1996. The combined effects of the aforementioned agreements and Cynthia's divorce proceedings resulted in plaintiff never having a legal father. So her mother was getting divorced at the time, the lawsuit says. To adding incredible insult to injury, plaintiff has had to spend her entire life hiding and concealing who her real father is. Defendant Jones' only role in plaintiff's life to date, other than to shun her, has been to coerce her from ever disclosing his identity. Despite that, the lawsuit says that Davis has excelled academically and professionally. She now works as an aide to U.S. Rep. Ronnie Jackson of Texas after working for 14 months in the White House during Trump's presidency. Enough said. After Davis's birth, Davis, Spencer, and Jones worked together to conceal his paternity, the lawsuit says. Faced with the literal existence of plaintiff and the public and personal ramifications that result therefrom, defendant Jones, forever the deal-making entrepreneur that he is, decided to do what he always does: make a deal to assure that he would not be publicly or privately identified and or declared as a plaintiff's father. Davis Spencer was going through divorce at the time. Defendant Jones, with the help of lawyers, knowing that Cynthia was now a single mother with a very young child and an uncertain financial future at best, set out to negotiate a settlement, a.k.a. hush money, that would exchange money for silence.
Yeah.
Jones is alleged to have set up two trusts that the lawsuit alleges contained the hush money payment and the hush money terms, including $375,000 paid to Davis Spencer. Jones agreed to provide, through indirect means and with his personal identity hidden, ongoing financial support for Cynthia and plaintiff so long as Cynthia remained silent about the fact that he was plaintiff's father. If Cynthia failed to maintain such silence, the support would end at defendant Jones' discretion, and Cynthia would supposedly be in breach of the deal. The lawsuit was posted on the Dallas County Court's website Monday and thus available to hundreds of Texas lawyers and other members of the public.
It's a tale as old as time.
A tale as old as time. When you have unlimited money, you can just, all reason goes out the window when money is involved.
Oh, my goodness. You can't pay off all your skeletons. You think you're doing it?
They're always going to catch up to you. Always, always, always.
Yep. Whether it's with money or shame or any or denial, it's always going to come back to bite you in the butt.
Yep. It always is. But you know what? He is part of the good old boys club that can just it won't do anything.
Well, he may not be able to. He may be able to afford it.
Exactly.
But at this point, the jig is up, right? Like the secret is out if we're reading about it. And I would think that was what he was trying to avoid in the first place, was that she would.
Right. Just by her filing the lawsuit.
Right.
It's done.
Yep. I hate to say this because this is going to sound callous, but you know what? I'm going to speak to the straight men out there. Don't screw around and think that it's not going to come back and bite you in the ass.
Especially nowadays.
I mean, really. And now this girl was born in 1996, and he may have thought he could have gotten away with it. You know what? And I'm sorry, just don't do it.
Right.
Take responsibility, for God's sake.
Yeah.
I hope it was worth it. I hope that his liaison was worth it.
Yeah.
I doubt it.
And I wonder how many more of those liaisons there were.
Of course. Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
I know.
It hurts to think about sometimes. Okay, let's do one more story.
Okay.
Here's one with a twist. Okay, so this is from the Australian Associated Press. Penny Mackison finally has the name that feels right to her. Nearly 60 years after she was inadvertently swapped with another baby when the infants were placed for adoption. Okay, so they even switch adoptive babies at birth. After mustering the courage to contact the person that records indicated was her biological mother, the Melbourne woman spent 2 decades getting to know and love the woman and her family.
Oh, no.
But gnawing doubts spurred by the fact that she resembled no one in the family led her and her believed to be mother to take DNA tests, which revealed they were not related.
Why did she think this woman was her mother without the DNA test?
She was told that was what the
The birth certificate said.
The records said.
Oh, okay. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. Adoption Information Services then connected with an elderly Greek woman, Mackeson's real biological mother. After a 15-minute court hearing from before the Victorian court on Tuesday, Mackeson's 33-year search for the truth was finalized. She was allowed to correct her birth records and integrate her Greek mother's name with the one given to her by her adoptive parents.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, it's just a huge relief. She says, it feels like this is the first day of the rest of my life. I feel much more optimistic and feel freer. It's not just a vindication. It never felt right and like I belonged, but I feel anchored now. Remember how I've said stuff like that before? You feel anchored to the earth?
Well, yes. And also, it's similar to you in that you went and spent time with who you presumed was your birth father. And
yeah. Luckily, it wasn't 20 years.
No, but you still invested emotionally in that family.
In the entire family.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I did. She applied for her adoption records in 1989 and obtained what was thought to be her birth name and mother's identity in 90. She sat on this information until 1997, when after the premature death of her twins, she felt motivated to approach the Victorian Adoption Network for Information and Self-Help, which is Vanish, a Melbourne-based adoption support network, in order to contact her biological mother. The woman agreed to have contact with Mackeson, who then spent nearly 20 years forming a rapport with the family. 20 years. Wow. Something never seemed right, and out of sheer desperation, she took a DNA test, revealing she was 70% Greek. Huh. And 0 Irish, English, Welsh.
So in other words, the English Welsh woman was Greek to her.
Well done. Well done, sir.
Thank you.
Another DNA test confirmed in 2019, Mackeson and the woman she thought was her mother were not genetically related. She notified the state government, and they soon identified a Greek mother who delivered a girl at Queen Victoria Hospital the same day she was born. The two babies, it became clear, must have been swapped and incorrectly identified. There's no mention of what happened to that other baby. The Greek woman said through interpreters she was glad to hear Mackeson had lived a happy and healthy life, but she did not want further contact. Mackeson will, in July, visit Greece for the first time, traveling with a passport bearing her integrated name, something that she describes as magical. This is all speaking about what we talked about before with the names. She will visit the Peloponnese region where her mother is from with her husband and son, but there will be no Greek family reunion. Won't get to meet my mother because she doesn't want contact. And that will be very, very sad. But who wants to be the person who stresses out an 80-something-year-old woman so much she has a heart attack? I couldn't live with that either.
Well, I mean, that's a really great attitude. Rather than this being a story about her disappointment, about how she finally found her birth mother and the birth mother won't see her, she's embracing her heritage, you know, as a Greek woman. And I think that's wonderful.
And there's no mention of siblings or extended family, but that's always an option too.
Yes.
I mean, the biological mother may have expressed, "Please don't tell anybody. This will kill me." You know,
right.
There, which has happened to me before with clients. I have had mothers. I had a mother, I talked about this about a year ago, where I contacted the mother and a friend responded to me saying, please, I want no contact. And I spoke a little further, said, could you just tell me, give me health information? Or because that's what she really needs. And then she said, well, actually, I'm not her. I'm her friend. I'm protecting her. And we talked a little bit and I recommended therapy and recommended that I hope she comes around. So it's a year later, and the mother has not spoken to her yet, but she has been given permission to speak to a half sister.
Oh, well.
So sometimes you really have to wait it out.
It's a long process.
Yes, but if you barge in and insist right away, you could close the door forever. But if you let time do its thing, sometimes things will work
because
out.
everybody has to process this stuff in their own time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, those are interesting stories, Julie.
Thank you, Richard.
Shall we take a break?
I think we shall.
Thank you for listening to Cut Off Genes with Julie Dixon Jackson and Richard Castle. You can support us by going to patreon.com/Cut Off Genes podcast. Now, back to the program.
Okay, it is time for part 2 of my conversation with NPE and advocate Cassandra Adams.
Great. Do you remember where we left off?
We left off basically her telling her story about how she found out that she was an NPE, and we were just getting into discussing the ramifications of keeping secrets from your children and the industry encouraging people to keep secrets. And we're now going to get into finding her father.
Great. Let's listen in.
All right.
My mom told me she was not counseled specifically not to tell. She was just it was kind of insinuated, you know, it was kind of like, go home, have sex. Mm-hmm. This will be your child, you know?
Yeah.
Which in some ways makes it harder to digest because it put more of the burden on my mom and dad to make that decision. Mm-hmm. And so knowing that they made the wrong decision hurts. Yes. You know, I could almost I understand the time period and I understand the issues regarding stigma and all of that. I really understand. And it's still hard to swallow the idea that they still willingly made that choice, even though it was still the cultural norm. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah, I bet.
But I was able to find my biological father very easily. I'm very, very fortunate. My mom had a very crucial piece of evidence that was totally pure luck that she remembered this. But my parents were living in Westchester County, New York, and my mom said that one of the days that she was inseminated, her doctor came with the sample and just kind of casually mentioned that he had just driven from Long Island with the sample. She just kind of banked that in her mind, like, oh, he brought this sperm from Long Island. Okay.
Wait, so the doctor had collected it in Long Island? Is that what, or...
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The sample had been produced.
Interesting.
On Long Island. Okay. And then, driven a half an hour across the bridge to Westchester County, right outside of New York. Mm-hmm. And so I went back to my DNA matches and I had a half sibling match, which I had noticed, but I didn't really dig into. And I Googled this person's name and I saw that there were 3 doctors on Long Island with that last name. Oh. And it turned out that middle brother was was the correct one. But I surmised from that, okay, they were using medical students.
Right.
The sample was from Long Island. This person who comes up as a half sibling has a father, apparently, who is a doctor. This could be it. And it was. Yeah. And it was. And so I reached out, and my half sibling was very gracious, passed me along to her brother, and her brother, we chatted, we met, and then I was put in touch with my biological father.
And how did that go?
Oh, it's been really, really nice. He's a very nice person. Very glad to have found us. I was the second one to pop up. There was somebody who popped up on Ancestry right before I popped up on 23andMe.
So he was expecting it at this point.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So far there's 4 of us. And he's very glad to know us. Very glad. Yeah. He was, he's a doctor, a retired gynecologist. And he knew, the first email I got from him, he knew how important medical history was at a minimum, and he was very glad to be able to provide us with that, and also to elaborate a little bit on his personality. And I was so grateful that he immediately knew that not only are health conditions heritable, but personality and characteristics are also heritable. And he understood that right from the beginning. And I think now, like 4.5 years in, I think he probably has even a deeper understanding of that, having met
having witnessed it for himself. Right.
Exactly. It gives you a whole new perspective on it. But I'm very, very fortunate that even right from the very beginning, he understood that was something important. And it's been really, really amazing to see parts of myself and to realize that some of the parts of myself that I really was very uncomfortable with are in large part due to this gentleman who is my biological father. And that realizing the kind of long-term effects that had on my mental health, my psychological well-being, and my perception of myself. And that's been a tough thing to swallow. I think that's been the hardest thing about meeting him and about knowing him is the grief, which I know, adoptees 100% understand that. The grief of realizing that you missed out on that mirroring for your whole life. It's very, very hard to kind of wrap your mind around. And it's bizarre. I was, discussing this with someone, how, I'm very much like my mom. We're very similar personalities in a lot of ways. And I definitely have similarities with my dad who raised me. Definitely. But when I met my biological father, it was just like, meeting this ghost of myself. It was like meeting myself, but in this weird ghostly form where so much of myself was reflected. And I'm just like, how on earth can you be me? How on earth are the things that you're saying not things that I'm saying?
Wow. Wow. Yeah, I can imagine because, I grew up knowing that I was not genetically related to either of my parents. So I was prepared. I think I had a more of a, I spent my life wondering about this, but for you, it was also sudden. That
it was all very sudden. And it was hard because going from the discovery to actually meeting him in person was 4 months.
Oh, wow.
And I know for some people it happens even faster. Some people meet their new parent that weekend, I mean, but even 4 months was, I don't regret it because I think it would have just eaten me up if I hadn't met him so soon after the discovery. But looking back, it was a lot to digest at once.
I'm sure. So you talked about advocacy a little bit in the beginning. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So after this experience, I was completely blown away by how impactful it was, mostly in a negative way at first. I mean, I had very, very severe PTSD and CPTSD actually from this, combined with some other experiences that were kind of going on around a similar time period, and how much damage had been done not only to me but to my entire family, and how I was like, I cannot let this happen to other people, and so I started pretty much right away, kind of delving into some online communities for the whole triad, the whole donor conception triad, and talking to parents, and it's very interesting because as things went along, my mom especially was very supportive, as supportive as she could be. for the first maybe up to a year, but especially for the first like 6 months or so, tried to be supportive, tried to be understanding. Obviously, there were still arguments and tears and things, but it became too much for her, and after about a year, she couldn't be supportive anymore. And she just got angry again for the secret being out. And when I would talk to parents, it would help me gain a little more insight, into what the mindset is of somebody who's using donor eggs or donor sperm or donor embryos, and I was grateful for the opportunity to be able to talk to younger parents and help impress upon them how impactful this experience is and how much of an effect it will have on your family if you don't disclose. Mm-hmm. And even if you do disclose and your child knows, the experience of meeting my biological father and the experience of talking with other donor-conceived people and other NPEs, and then as I've gotten on, talking with adoptees, the experience of knowing that biological parent and realizing the connection that exists and realizing the struggles that people deal with, even if they know, to find their identity. I realized how much weight that carried. And I was like, I need to help impress that upon younger parents so that they know how to help their children deal with this.
Yes.
And thankfully, a lot of the parents who are still keeping secrets are probably not seeking the advice of adult donor or conceived people. Unfortunately, I wish we had some kind of estimate, but there is still so much secrecy around donor conception, way more than around adoption.
I bet.
Even into the 1990s, it was still often advised to keep it a secret. And that just, it's funny because I spoke with my raising dad one time about this.
Just once, huh?
Never, he won't speak of it again, but I wanted to get out how much I still loved him and how much he was still my dad.
Yeah.
Of course he was still angry at me for discovering the secret. But one thing that he did say is that, well, maybe if you were adopted, we definitely, we would have told you when you were like, 10, 11, 12, but with this, like, there was no reason to tell you. I'm like, okay. All right.
Really?
I don't. Yep. So, cause it was common knowledge, I guess, in the early 80s that adoption should be disclosed, maybe not from birth as they suggest now,
10,
but
11 or 12. I mean, that is a terrible time to tell a child.
It's an awful time. I cannot imagine being told at that age, but but at least you would have told me, at least it would have been on your radar. But gosh, to think that being in many respects, half adopted, that requires no disclosure then, and that's still the mindset of a lot of families is that, well, because there's still a genetic connection somewhere, well,
then it's not a big deal.
What's the other half?
Yeah.
Well, what does that matter? It's well, if half of it matters to you, then the other half also is going to matter to your child.
Yeah. I think it's easier for men to not think about it at all. And if they think too much, it'll be too painful about them not being part of the whole triad.
It is. It's very, very difficult. And I'm very grateful to some of the parents I've met. There's a wonderful gentleman here in New York City who runs online support groups specifically for dads who use donor sperm. And he's just phenomenal. And I'm so glad that these resources exist now. And so that's kind of one of the things that I've helped. I was the first donor conceived moderator for the largest triad community out there. And thankfully now we have some more also, but it's been really rewarding, frustrating as well, but rewarding to be able to connect with families who have young donor conceived kids and be able to talk to them openly and realize that our goals are really the same. Like, we want the best for those kids,
right?
And for them to put their guard down so that we can talk about what's best for their kids. The importance of connecting early with siblings and the importance of using a donor who will be open to your children, hopefully from the beginning, but if, at least at some point, and the importance of getting medical history, because that's the other thing is the legal side of it, the legislation behind it. There's nothing.
Right.
There's nothing.
It's still the Wild West out there, huh?
Yeah. Legally, clinics can destroy records within, I think, 10, that there's the FDA mandates of 10 years that they keep records. There are no legal limits on number of siblings that can be produced from a single donor. Donors may go to multiple clinics, donate at different clinics. There are people with hundreds of siblings. There's no verification of donor health records, and there's no updates. There is no bank that mandates that donors provide health updates. So you're getting a snapshot of a person's health at age 20. Right. And, we're hoping to change some of those things. And also to outlaw anonymity, which sounds crazy, but other countries have done it. Other very progressive countries have done it. And the fact of the matter is that DNA testing is helping us because it is cementing, putting the nail in the coffin, as they say, to the idea of anonymity. If I can find somebody within 48 hours where no records exist, nothing. There's no records. There's no paperwork anywhere in existence that says who donated sperm to make me.
Right.
If I can find that person immediately, anybody can find anybody.
That's true.
And people donating their sperm or eggs or anything have to understand that they will be found, and it's not okay to sign up to be anonymous anymore. And it's not even practical. But
no. I wonder how many people. Do you have any idea of when they stopped? Like, now, what do they tell donors? Do we know?
I've gone to talks of people who work at clinics, and there are some clinics who encourage identity release as a, and they do, and some clinics will tell them about DNA testing, but I don't think it's quite hammered home. It's still given to them as a choice. Would you rather be anonymous or would you rather be open at 18? And then I don't think there's really counseling into what those choices mean.
This is probably not full informed consent. Yeah.
Or the idea of what might these people want from you when they contact you, either if it's 18 years or if they manage to find you earlier than that, what might they want from you? What are the expectations? Because if you're not willing to meet those expectations, then maybe you shouldn't donate.
Don't donate. Yeah.
Don't donate if you're not willing to meet those and every person has different expectations for their biological parent. But we feel the minimum is to keep them updated of health concerns.
Absolutely.
That is the bare minimum requirement you have as someone selling their sperm or eggs. But really, morally, there's more of a responsibility than that.
Certainly.
At least we feel that way.
Yeah.
But
And we're right. We're always right.
Exactly. Of course. I mean, there's a book, and I forget the author, but she wrote something about considering, your sperm or your eggs, basically like considering it a hazardous material. Like if there's a hazardous material, you don't let it out of your sight. You don't put it out into the world where it can cause harm.
Yeah.
And kind of viewing your sperm or your eggs that way, where it's like, unless you're willing to face the ramifications of letting your gametes out there into the world, don't let them out there.
Interesting. I mean, it's a part of you that you're putting out there.
It is. Yeah. I mean, really. I mean, so many donors. I'm mostly men. People in my generation are mostly sperm donor conceived. And most sperm donors identify as men, and so most of these middle-aged men that we're dealing with now are shocked at the resemblance. Like, yes, we can look exactly like you. Yeah. Because we are from your sperm in the same way that your raised children
just
are from your
children. Sperm. Yeah, just like children from your body look like your family.
I'm sure money doesn't hurt, but my bio dad was a gynecologist, and he said that the reason he decided to donate was because he actually saw couples come into his practice who were struggling, and he saw how much pain they were going through, and he wanted to help. And he was, he wasn't the student; he was actually a practicing, doctor already.
Oh, wow.
So he didn't need the money, and it was not. He got $35, so right. But he actually wanted to help. And that's the thing too, is yes, it eases the sting a little bit to know it was altruistic as opposed to like beer money. Cause a lot of people are young college students and, but it's still, there's a word for it, and misguided altruism, I think, is what we kind of settled on, is where you think of it as altruistic, but really you're kind of giving your kids away. So how altruistic is that?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But it's painful in a different way,
yes.
But the fact that I've found some healing is partly due to the recognition, I think, that my bio dad has with the connection that we have,
right,
and his legitimizing that connection. Yeah.
That's huge. Is there a particular organization that you're affiliated with that you'd like to promote?
Yeah, I can send the link for you to post for our large triad group.
Sure.
It's got a big long name, donor conceived people and parents and donors and things. And I also just started a position with a dear friend of mine named Melissa, who's also donor conceived, has just started a community called Donor Conceived Community Support Groups. And with the pandemic and everybody using Zoom so much, she kind of broke through and has created a whole nonprofit of support groups, peer-led support groups specifically for donor-conceived people, and various groups for different demographics, LGBTQ, biracial, and I have been leading the Jewish identity support group, which has also been one of my huge passions since the discovery is figuring out what all this means. And I did actually finish my conversion to Judaism, and kind of helping people navigate what it means when you find out that you are
a different ethnicity,
Jewish,
yeah,
ethnically, and what does that mean culturally? Can you identify as Jewish? What is, it's a very complicated thing. So that's been one of my passions. So yeah, Donor Conceived Community is up and running. And there's also a nonprofit started by a friend named Erin Jackson. It's called Donor Conceived Council, and it will be the first major nonprofit to advocate for the rights of donor-conceived people, hopefully work on legislation to help us retain our health records and anonymity and things like that.
That's amazing. Cassandra, thank you so much for talking to me.
I love your work. I love connecting with adoptees. That's been another big movement I've made, is trying to kind of bridge that gap so we can learn from each other.
Yep.
So amazing. And the work that you have all done in establishing kind of this need for genetic identity and the right for us to have it is so phenomenal and so groundbreaking. And it's something that we're really hoping to piggyback off of to get people to understand.
All right. Thank you so much, Cassandra. I will have Cassandra post those links to those organizations to the Facebook page.
Thank you, Cassandra. I am Richard Castle, and you can visit my website, richardcastle.com, or you can follow me on the Twitter or on Instagram @CastleSongs.
I'm Julie Dixon Jackson. Anything you need to know about me, you can find at cutoffgenes.com, including hiring me to work on your case or anything else. Oh, by the way, if you're a Patreon member, don't forget when you sign up to include your mailing address so that I have somewhere to send your goodies.
Oh my gosh, I saw the picture of the little black sheep that you...
Do you like the black sheep?
You knitted or crocheted? What is it?
So it's made out of a sock. Oh. A couple of socks.
It is
clean. They're clean.
But it's so cute. Oh my God.
You know what? I really identify with the black sheep for obvious reasons. And I kind of feel like that needs to somehow be my thing.
So you can get a little black sheep from Julie if you're a Patreon member, and then you need to put a little voice box inside like a squeeze doll so that when you press it, what will it say, Julie?
The truth is in your genes.